Folks, welcome back into another episode of A Level Deeper. I am your host, Chad Miles, and what do you get when you get two podcast producers together to have a conversation? Well, it actually turns out you end up with a show with a few different technical issues and hiccups and a lot of things that you might not expect that were out of our control, and that really was a fitting theme for this episode and for my conversation with Rachel Giordano. She often goes by the name Producer Rachel, which you may be familiar with if you are in the Metro Detroit area. And I mean, Rachel's made a whole 25 year career off of being this producer role who essentially is in control of everything. She spent time in this role for major television networks and major production. She spent many years in radio. And through that whole process of playing this role of producer, Rachel talks in this conversation about how she's developed this sort of necessity for control. And then she decided to take a step away from that role. And she wanted to put herself in a different position, the position of being a creator, of putting her own thoughts and ideas and creations out into the world. And that's been her most recent venture. And really, it just kind of set her on this couple-year journey that she's been on of starting to answer the question for maybe the very first time of how are you really? When she took a serious look at that question and that answer, I think she started to make some changes in her life. Ultimately, Rachel and I have a lot in common in that we are creators. We do marketing consulting work for our clients and social media work for our clients. And so it was just great to chat with someone who works in that industry. And it's also fun talking to someone who is in that process and effort of trying to create for themselves. So Rachel shares what some of that process has been like for her. I talk about what some of this podcast process has been like for me. And if you have the desire to create something of your own, we talk about how we go about prioritizing our own creation when it can be so easy to put it on the back burner. All right, well, future Chad is going to hand the mic back to past Chad, and he's going to host this conversation with Rachel Giordano. Enjoy. All right, Rachel, I always like starting with things that seem to happen around the podcast. You've got a pillow on your lap right now that has 3 words on it. Tell us about that pillow.
It is my emotional support pillow. Can you see it? So
for people who can't see it, who are listening to us, it is a bright blue pillow. It's a very nice color. And it's got big white letters, emotional support pillow.
Yes, it literally says emotional support pillow on it. I had these made for myself, but you can buy them in my TeePublic store, FYI, shout out. We'll send you the link. You can add it in your description. I created these because for me, every time I sit down, especially to do my own podcast or to record anything, I feel very exposed. I have this disassociation with my body and what I look like on camera versus how I mentally see myself. And so it just sort of covers your little pooch, right? Like a lot of women, I think, will sit on the couch and grab a pillow, right? So immediately, there goes that. Immediately, it's just easier to sort of feel comforted and comfortable. And I figured, especially with this conversation in a podcast called A Level Deeper, I'm going to need something to help me with that support. So I love it. I think it's a great size. I've got 3 different sizes. This is like a big one that's next to me. They're in a couple different colors, but I created it for myself, honestly. Everything I've done like on that TeePublic site, shirts and stuff are just stuff that I wanted to order for myself. And so I just created it and other people started asking, hey, how can I get that? And it's like, oh, well, I never thought of like actually promoting it. It's like, okay, but they're the perfect. It just makes me feel like I can like, okay, settle in and be comfortable now.
Hey, which is important. I'm curious about what has been some of your mindset around coming on a show called A Level Deeper and knowing that you're likely to go a level deeper during a conversation. What has your relationship to that idea been leading up to this process?
I ignored it. I disassociated from it because I didn't want to overthink it, because every time I think of things I think I want to say, it doesn't ever go that way anyway. So why waste time thinking about something that I can't control? And then I was very conscious of the first 15 or the last 15 minutes before we connected to just sit here to breathe and just sort of like open up and just figure out how our energies can connect, and I can truly just allow myself this space in this moment. I think that's the hardest thing for me, is I never live in the moment. I'm always thinking of the 20 other things I have to do. And especially, I mean, you know this, when you're planning anything, when you're producing anything, when you're directing anything, you have to, from beginning to end, think about all the possibilities that could go wrong, right? God forbid you forget a cord or a light or something. So you have to sort of go through every option for everything. But I do that for everything in my life. And that's the problem. So like a family vacation, I can plan. And then in that moment, I've already lived every possible outcome. So I'm not actually living in the now. So for this, I'm practicing trying to just be present and allow myself the space to see what comes out, right? What can happen without me controlling your narrative. So that's where we're at. So I tried not to prepare for anything, which is very hard for me.
Yeah, I mean, because, well, okay, so I've got to tell you, I was thinking of you yesterday, specifically because I had a video shoot yesterday, and it was around 1:30 in the afternoon when I had finished my video shoot. And for me, that is always like the most cathartic, just like relaxing
drained.
feeling of,
Your battery is
just
drained.
completely drained. And I was thinking about, like, I don't know how many people would fully understand this feeling of like, I've been planning the shoot for weeks. I've been interacting with the client. We've been talking about what is the shoot going to entail. I've got to think about and plan all the equipment that I need, and I've got to rent the equipment, and then I've got to get all the equipment, and I've got to do my test setup. I got to make sure everything works. I got to account for 700 individual items on the shoot day. I'm solo, so I'm directing the whole thing. My lighting's got to be good. My sound's got to be good. You know, all these things that, and so there's just that feeling afterward of like, I just melt and turn into a puddle. And I was just thinking about, I'm like, you know who would understand this feeling really, really well? Rachel. Rachel would know exactly how this feels.
Yes, it's crazy. And especially sometimes I'm so drained, it's like to pack everything up. I'm like, oh my God, like this sucks right now, because you just want to crawl into a hole and die. But your brain is also like, I know where my edits are, right? So it's like, okay, like as we're going and we're doing the thing and I'm directing and producing it and helping them with lines or whatever it is and trying to make them feel comfortable. And thank God the mic is still working. And oh my God, how much more time do I have on this battery? Right. But so, at a certain point in time, okay, I then want to, as drained as I am, I then want to actually go edit everything, because it's like, as it's fresh in my head and I had those bing, bing, bing moments, right, with the client where it's like, okay, can I literally get the energy? Why is that happening? Do you see that? Why did that happen?
So for people listening, all of a sudden, Rachel's screen started showing like fireworks going off. I'm not quite sure if that was part of.
I kid you not. This has been happening with me lately with if an EFT tapper, emotional freedom technique. They do tapping. Have you ever seen that? Tappers.
Okay.
I have somebody who taps with me, and sometimes we don't know why, when like I have one of those moments, this random thumbs up will come up. It's doing it. It must be a hand motion. It's got to be a hand motion thing. The fireworks just came up again. And I always like, it's the universe telling me like, yes, you're doing the right thing. Exactly. Keep saying what you're saying. Why do I get fireworks? No one's ever had fireworks on this before.
No, but I think that's my interpretation of it as well. I think that is a celebration of this conversation that we're having. I'm
Italian, though, to not be able to move my hands. Like every time I move my hands, these fireworks are going to show up. That's very weird. The universe has been taking over, like the collective, God, whatever you want to say, energy.
If I do it, it doesn't happen to me.
Has been taking over a lot of my electronics lately, and it says no space again. What do you want me to do?
Okay.
Did it record the first part at least? Like the first part's there?
Should have. Yep. Okay. We should have all that. So now, through the magic of editing, we're back.
That's literally what I tell everybody.
Yeah.
The magic's in the edits. That's why I want to do a podcast about doing a podcast where I literally show me saying the same thing over and over again, because I, effed it up the first 3 times. The magic's in the edits.
That's the reality of the creation. So anyway, if you're listening, we had some technical issues. We are back now. So if the conversation doesn't feel like it's flowing, that's because it technically, from a technological standpoint, hasn't been. However, we are back. Control. I want to talk about control because you have made a 20-year plus career out of essentially being in positions of control.
Yeah.
What is your relationship with control like these days?
Well, nowadays, I'm trying to have less control. I'm trying to allow. I haven't allowed for the first 48 years of my life. I turned 48 in October. And I've got this weird timeline, which I'm also trying to realize I'm not on a timeline, right? Like there's no timeline and the finish line is a mirage. We get it. However, I've got now 10 months now, or depending on when you air this, but in almost 2 years, I'll be 50. And that's a huge number for a lot of people. But now after having 48 birthdays, I realize really nothing changes unless you take action. But I also have too much control or try to control too many things because I was too attached to the outcome. So what I'm trying to do is detach myself from the outcome. I already know I made the ask to the universe, right? To universe, God, the collective, however you want to refer to it. I already kind of know what the big vision is for my life. And so often I see it as like this giant paint by numbers picture, or the ones where you would connect like 1 to 2, like a connect the dots picture, like a connect the dots picture. And instead of allowing, the universe to sort of fill that in for me, right? Because I created the big picture, but they're figuring out the how. I would try to like take the pencil and be like, no, we're going to do it this way. And that never worked out for me. It just didn't. And so finally, when I've started to realize when I'm trying to take control and sort of put myself in the timeout and take a breath, why do I feel like I have to control the situation? What is it that you think isn't going the right way? And is there really a right way? If ultimately the end goal is the same, isn't it okay that maybe we get there a different way than we anticipated? So detaching myself from the outcome and giving up. Oh my God. Do you see that? The thumbs up. You swear to God, this has never happened with anybody else.
No.
There has to be something on my computer that you guys, like the thumbs up emoji came when I put my thumbs up. Okay, this is the weirdest thing ever. See, the universe just likes what I'm saying. It just agrees with me. And I understand giving up the oars. I think a lot of the times I would give up the oars, but I would scream going down the stream with the flow, right? The whole way, like, no, this isn't how I envisioned this happening. And it's hard when you're a producer, like your whole life is like, what's the big picture? How do we get there? Right? What do we need to do to execute? And so you have to have some control over a situation. But when it comes to like your own life and the day to day, I think I wasn't having fun because I want to control things, because the outcome wasn't how I wanted it to be. So I would go and do all these great things. And at the end, it would be like, yeah, well, this could have been better, or I could have done this better, or you know what I mean? Like you're so hard on yourself. Everyone else is giving you a pat on the back. But because things didn't go the way I wanted them to, because I had this outcome I wanted to achieve, I wasn't enjoying the moment like everybody else was. So I'm trying to give up control. I'm trying to learn to live in the now. And really, it's all about breathing for me. I have all my tenseness. No, all my tension is up here, right? And I have a tendency to just stop breathing up in my chest. You feel that like, oh my God. And so I've had multiple people that I've worked with, spiritual healers, et cetera, that are like, you need to just breathe, like just sit and breathe. And that was so hard for me to just allow. So do I still control things? Yes. I have a type A personality. It's very hard for me to give that up. Am I more aware of myself and my emotions and why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling? Or at least taking a beat to say, why am I feeling this way? Why am I uncomfortable? Yes, I'm taking that time to do that now. I've avoided uncomfortableness my whole life. I have lived in fight or flight for the last 48 years. And so that's hard. It's a hard space to come out of. And my traumas may not compare to other people's traumas, but they're mine. And so coming out of fight or flight is a hard space to be in. And especially when you're somebody that wants control over everything because you want it to go a certain way. It is really tough. It's really tough.
Based on how you're describing this whole experience and how you're talking about yourself, it seems like this has been a recent journey. Is that true?
When you have that honest conversation of somebody really saying, how are you today? I was never going to answer that question, honestly. I'm fine. How are you? Right? Because if I really looked at how am I today and I was honest, that would unravel, right? Once you start to like scratch that little itch, right? Because that energy then starts to shift everything. There it is again.
And there it is again. And there's our out of space issue.
Nothing is. Let me just double check that. Yeah. I was saying something so good too.
I know what you were saying, so we'll come back to it. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Take a breath.
The universe has been sending Rachel and I a message about control. Here we are with our perfect podcast setups, our perfect audio setups. We got everything is looking good. Everything's all of our chords. We're two producers. We love controlling things, and yet we've run into technology issues 3 separate times now. So how about that for a message about control?
I mean, it's the reality, right? And what I've learned is how we react to the situation, right? What can we control is our reaction. And going back to like, had you had this conversation with me 5, 8, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, even when I was started in TV, would we have the same conversation? No, because I was, I don't want to say insane. I just wasn't in that space, right? Like, of course I can control the situation. Of course it can go the way that I want it to. But the way that I want it to, or the way that I perceive that I want it to, may not be the best. And so my reaction to it not going well was never good, right? I would be pissed off. I'd get angry. I'd yell at some people sometimes. Like it's not who I wanted to be, but I also didn't know that I could say, you know what, I need a minute. Or you know what, I need to step away from this conversation and come back when I'm calmer and we can discuss this. Even in TV, I would get so frustrated. And it was like, I didn't know I had the power to say, you know what, this isn't the right space or time for me right now. I need to like digest this a little bit and then we can come back and have a conversation. I said that to somebody once, like I started to pack up my stuff and they were like, what, you're running away from it? And I took a breath and I was like, I just need a minute. Like, I just need a minute. Right? Like, I just need to breathe and like really think about how do I want to continue this conversation? And when I started to take those breaths and when I started to take those moments, that's when I started to kind of realize, I think I want to do my own thing. If I'm going to put this much time, effort, and energy into something, do I want it to be for like a larger corporate entity or do I want to do it for myself? And at the time when I left radio, I wanted to leave for that opportunity to kind of just do something different. It's hard to do, but I was tired of being reactive. And I realized like I can't make a change if I don't take a time out and really do the work and look and think about like, okay, why am I so reactive? And I'm still going through that right now. I have a whole thing that I'm trying to do of going through old journals and pictures of myself. I digitized old videos of myself. And I kind of want to go back and look at like, was it something inside of me? Was it something outside of me? What made me so uncomfortable with being uncomfortable that I had to either fight or flight with everything? I don't know the answer to that yet.
Yeah, I mean, well, so if you look back on your life professionally, I mean, do you feel like that was that a part of your story before your professional career began? Or do you feel like that was sort of a learned thing through the work that you were doing?
No, it was for a while. Like even I went to Catholic school my whole life, which I liked wearing uniforms. It was great. I didn't care. I didn't have to like think about what I had to wear. But when I went to one Catholic high school, I kind of was changing my friends around a little bit. And so I switched high schools. Instead of staying and trying to figure out like, okay, why are these people not resonating with me anymore? And how can I nurture these friendships differently? I flew. I went to a whole different high school and started a whole different group of friends. Instead of staying in the uncomfortableness, I made my mom switch schools. You know what I mean? Like that's not a quick, easy thing. So the last 2 years I switched to a different school, and that's where I met like some of my best friends. And, but no, I think it's been my whole life. Instead of really looking at like, okay, what in this situation is making me uncomfortable and how can I fix it? Instead of just running away. Even when I worked at The View, I started as an intern, worked my way up to producer, and kind of was just like, okay, I did it. What's next? And I left to go work for Walt Disney Feature Animation because I've always wanted to make movies. And so instead of being a lifer there or staying even longer, I was like, nope, done. Let's go. And like, why did I run away from that? When I went from Disney shut down, so I went from there to Home Shopping Network because I want to stay in Florida. I was married to somebody else at the time who wanted to stay in Florida, which sucks because I still have this Disney dream that, you know, maybe one day it'll happen. Who knows? I loved working for Disney. So, but my husband at the time was like, I don't want to move to LA. My boss was like, move to LA. It's the movie business. Movies get shut down all the time. That was the one thing I've never actually fled, right? It was taken away from me. And so in my head, I want it back. I still want that experience back. I would love to work for the Disney team. FYI Disney, if you're watching. So I went from that to HSN, and I gave myself 2 years at Home Shopping Network because I was like, this isn't what I want to be doing, but I liked what I was learning. I was finally learning like mixing content and storytelling with selling, which is what I do for my clients, right? I mean, imagine you have to talk about like this product for 15 minutes, right? Like the specs, the colors, all that's your first 3 minutes. And then what are you going to do for the rest of the time? You have to tell a story, right? You teach people to be aspirational and inspirational. But even there, I was like, okay, I gave myself 2 years. I matched my 401k and I left and I moved in with my mom at 28, no job, nothing. And I was just in that space feeling like I was being divinely guided. Why was I quitting? I don't know. Why was I going back to Atlanta? I had no idea. Honest to God, no clue. I had a letter from Barbara Walters and a great resume. And I was like, something will happen. I don't know what. And so in Atlanta, I got a job as a producer for a radio show, the Steve and Vicky Morning Show. They had been on for 17 years, a heritage station, a heritage morning show. And I walked into, back then you had to like look in the newspaper for like networking events for women and jobs and stuff. And there was one for women. I went and one of the speakers had been on this radio station. And so I was like, well, I know they're hiring a producer. So I walked up to her with my resume and my Barbara Walters recommendation letter. And I just said, I know they're hiring a producer. I want to work for them. And she was like, okay. And she, got me an interview, and that's how I started my radio career, literally. And then I was there for about 2 years, and I traveled a lot. I would go to LA a lot. I would go to New York a lot for premieres and all that stuff and making connections. And it was so much fun. But they weren't changing. They weren't willing to change, right? You had a male host that had been doing this for, longer than I was alive, who was very much like, and I love you, Steve. I love you to death. He knows that. We've had conversations after I left about how he could have handled things differently. But there were times where he would be frustrated because he didn't understand a younger audience. He only understood women through his wife, right? Or the people in his life, or his co-host, Vicky, Vicky got it. She would try to sort of like, okay, how can we expand the show? How can we make this different? How can we be innovative and try something new? He wasn't down for that. I've been doing this for X amount of years. This is how it's going to go. And so there would be times I'd be talking on the air with them on the air, and he would just pod my mic down because he was just done. And it was like, and that stuck with me for a while, to the point where it's like, wow, you have control over whether I can talk or not. And because you don't like it, or it's outside of your realm of existence or outside of your box, or it's not something different for you because he was uncomfortable, just potted my mic down. And that was tough. That is so tough, especially for a woman to just sort of be in that situation where it's like, you don't want to be heard or what you're saying doesn't matter. And maybe that wasn't his intention, but that's how it was perceived by me. And I internalized that for a really long time. And so when Mojo came and iHeartMedia came and said, we want you to work for us, I was ready to leave because I was like, these guys aren't trying to do anything new. And so I was with them for about 13 years. And I loved it. I loved radio, but it was just like, I'm not a lifer, if that makes sense, right? Like and again, maybe it's me running away when things get uncomfortable, but I wanted to do something different. I had been told my whole life about how great I was and how special I was and how smart I was and how I can perceive things differently and I can look at a situation and really find the story. And I was like, okay, well, what if I started doing that for other people? What if I did it, for myself as a creator? And I just kind of felt like once COVID hit, I think it changed a lot for everyone. And I just sort of put myself in a position of, I think it's just time to leave for another opportunity. And what the opportunity was at the time, I wasn't really 100% sure. I was side hustling with like some clients doing some stuff on the side for social media and stuff. But so instead of doubling down, once I left and really starting a business and doing my own thing, I pivoted my focus to my daughter, who I think was, I want to say like 8 at the time, and 6, 7, 8-ish. And she always wanted to go to LA. She wanted to audition. She wanted to be in TV, all those things. And instead of me focusing on myself finally, right, and doing the work and figuring it out and figuring out why am I running away all the time, I ran away again, literally to LA with my daughter, lived in an RV in our family's driveway, which is crazy. And during COVID, there were still auditions during stuff, but a lot of it was online. So I probably could have just stayed here. But I figured, all right, let's get her out there. Let's get her. We had private lessons. She did improv. We did self-tapes. We did auditions every day. So I was mom, I was teacher, and I was momager. And that was awful. It really it was not easy for me to handle. And I also started to realize I'm running away again. Like I'm growing something for her. I'm not doing this for me. This isn't for me. This is for her. Why do I always focus my talents on everybody else and not myself? So I still don't really know why. I think I'm getting closer to the why. I think it's just feeling like, am I valuable enough to put myself out there? And whether I get subscribers or not, whether anything comes out of this, am I okay with this space and time just being vulnerable and being myself and maybe even helping one person? Am I okay with that? Because I think a lot of people get into this creation world and they think I'm going to make millions of dollars and I'm going to grow a brand and I'm going to have sponsorships and all this stuff. And it just is not like that. Maybe for some people, maybe if you're like an Elise Myers and all of a sudden everybody understood her energy and it was beautiful, but she wasn't putting out content. I don't know if you're familiar with her on TikTok, Elise Myers.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
She wasn't putting out content to make money. Like that wasn't the energy that was coming from her. So of course she had all these wonderful opportunities come to her because it wasn't from a space of greed. It was from a space of gratitude. And I think that's where I'm at. I have to flip flop that and be grateful that I'm here, that I can help people. And if I keep myself in this creator space and being vulnerable, I do think 2024 is going to be all about being vulnerable. And then 2025, we're going to really step into our power, all of us. And we're all creators. We can all create something. And I really think that I want people to know there's so much space for every single one of us. It may not be huge. It may not be like the money you thought was going to come in. Because if you're doing it to just share value, to help other people, that's enough. That has to just be enough. And so when I went from LA back home, my daughter got 3 offers from agents. And one we really sat down with. And she basically said, this is a job. This isn't a game. This isn't fun. When I send you on something, it's a job. And try to explain that to the 7 or 8-year-old, right? My daughter was like, I want to go home to daddy. My husband and my son were here. She's like, I want to go back to school. And so we came back here, and it's taken me about 2.5 years since that time to finally get going and be in a space and do the work where I realize, oh, I'm not on a timeline. Oh, there's nothing to run away from anymore, right? Except myself again. And there's no finish line. So I get content out when I get it out. I do it when I can do it. I edit when I can edit, right? It's not great for consistency for my own brand, but I'm not in that space where I want to scale it right now anyway. So who cares? Do we even have a question? I think I just talked for 10 minutes. I'm sorry. Everybody listening.
No, it's great. What was your fear? You know, you talk about this, you felt like you've been running so much of your life and maybe not having total clarity on what that means. But, you know, like I was specifically struck by when you talked about, you know, if someone were to really ask you, how are you really? And you weren't comfortable answering that question. As you think back to a time like that, you think back to some of these instances where you say you're running, what are you afraid of if you answer honestly?
I'm afraid of being honest because, like I said, once you're honest, right? If you're like, you know what? No, I'm not okay. And no, I'm not happy. And this wasn't just radio. I mean, I just gave you the whole resume of instances from when I was younger, my whole life, right? So no, I'm not happy. And it's not necessarily because of the situation I was in or something happening. Everything was normal, like every other day. I think I energetically get to a space where I'm just like, okay, yeah, that's cool. What's next? Right? Like I get really good at whatever I'm doing. And I think I just get kind of bored and it's like, okay, well, what's the next thing? What's the next challenge? And then when the next challenge was really looking inside myself to figure out, you know, why can't I just sit in the uncomfortableness sometimes and let it happen and let it roll? That's when it was like, shit, now I have to get really vulnerable with myself and figure out, why am I so uncomfortable with my body? Like, I'm uncomfortable with aging. I'm uncomfortable with my body. And I think it just comes from a self-love where I had a hard time pivoting to focus on my own content because it's like, who the fuck's going to watch this? Who cares? Right? We know imposter syndrome is running strong for all of us. And so when you buy the equipment and you get all the stuff and you get all the things, and then you flip the camera around from your client to yourself, it is such a different experience. I can walk anybody through anything. I had a client full-blown panic attack the other day when we were recording. And it was, I walked him through it, and it's just like, do it again until you feel comfortable. But when I turned that camera around and I pressed record, I think I still have the first recording of when I decided to do it, and not for social, like more for like a long form content, which is what I'm moving towards on YouTube. I think I looked at the camera and I was like, who the fuck cares? Who gives a shit? Right? And so I think there was a period of time where I had to really think of, why am I doing this? Your why is so important. And I think at the time it was like, well, just because I left all these great jobs and all these great, you know, communities of people, and I'm here now alone by myself. So I have to grow something. And I think that wasn't good enough for me. And so now that I've done the work and they're really truly looking inside myself, and I'm in a space where I can turn the camera on now. And the point isn't to make money or grow a brand. The point is, who can I help? I have done this for 20 plus years. I have so much knowledge and so much value I could give to other people. When I finally turned the camera around, and it wasn't about like, you know, where are my talking points and here's my bullet points. And it was just, what do I feel like sharing today? And how can that help somebody? Then the flow was so much easier. Because there's again, I can't control what's going to happen. Nobody may watch anything I do. And I have to be okay with that because I have to be true to myself. When you're creating art in whatever way that is, you kind of have to be okay with this is the flow I got from God, the universe, wherever. This is what I'm putting out because I feel compelled to do it now. I just have to do it. If nobody watches and nobody likes it, nobody comments and there's no subscribers, I have to just be okay with that. And so I'm finally in that space where it's like, whatever. I'll make money a different way. I'll pay the bills a different way, but I have to just make this because I just feel like I have to share.
Surrendering, right? Surrendering that
Yes.
control and just entrusting in. It's been a huge process for me over the years as well, where we can control, as you said, we can control ourselves. So we can control the inputs. We can't always control the outputs, meaning I can control my intention behind the things that I create. I can control my effort into them.
Mhm.
I can control why I'm doing them. I can control all of those things. And then we have a conversation like this and you push publish on it. And I can't control what happens from that point. I can influence it, but if all of the inputs up, leading up to that point have been in alignment with how I want to feel, who I want to be, what I want to represent, my intention for being here on this planet, then I've got to just mark that as a win, And I think
you did it. You showed up today.
Yeah.
Right? Like we just showed up today. That in of itself has to be the win and the success. So when you press publish, it doesn't matter. It's just like blow it out into the wind and the universe will take care of it. And especially, if we're not being consistent, right? Especially with podcasts, if you can't even get to your 8 episodes before you have podcast fatigue, just showing up is the battle. Just do the thing. Don't worry about growth and scaling and subscribers and that may or may never come. You have to be okay with, I showed up today and I shared something of value and was vulnerable with myself. And that's okay. If that's just it, that has to be okay.
I think about this, you mentioned self-love as something that you've talked about that maybe wasn't present for you. And I think about this, whether we're creating or even just to look at ourselves honestly, with that absence of self-love, like the way that I interpret that is, especially in that question of how are you really, and being honest with that answer is like, if you don't have that self-love or self-belief, then it's almost like a fear of, or not even recognizing internally, I might not actually be okay with the way that I feel. So it's not even about verbalizing that to someone else and being honest with someone else. Like you said, it's being honest with ourselves. And it's like, can I feel the way that I feel? And can that be okay? Can I accept that? Can I recognize it? Can I process it? And that is scary.
Yeah, being okay with not being okay. And then also, you're pulling at a thread. When you can sit and ask yourself, am I okay? And it's like, no, I'm not okay. My marriage fucking sucks. My kids are assholes. My house is a disgusting mess. My clients need way more from me than I can physically give them, right? Like my output of time is not equaling the amount of money I'm getting back from them, in my opinion, which then also means now I have to be uncomfortable and have that conversation of I have to start charging you more, right? Like you start to pull the thread. And you have to be in the right mental space when you are prepared to answer that question. Because as you're answering those questions, the universe, God, whatever, is also now listening. And it's like, oh, your marriage isn't working out. Great. Your husband's going to ask you for a divorce tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? Like your kids are being assholes. Awesome. Something else is going to happen, right? You're not happy in your job. Cool. FYI, you're going to be fired by Friday. Does that make sense? Like, so you have to really, for so long, I disassociated from that question because I knew if I answered it honestly, the energy will start to shift because the universe only brings you, God only brings you what you are asking for. So be prepared to pull the thread. And
change might start to happen.
100%. And change at the time, right? Like nobody wants to like leave their marriage, right? Or some people do. But whatever the change is going to be, the job, the kids, the family, whatever, it's going to be uncomfortable. It may be something that you are devastated over. But you have to remember it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. But you also have to remember when you need to be prepared to answer that question honestly. Like you had an interview the other day with somebody where he mentioned to the person at the checkout line, like, hey, bud, how you doing? And he was basically like, just getting through the day. And then he followed up because he thought like, oh, maybe this guy, needs a little bit more attention or energy. But he wasn't prepared to answer that question. It was just like, emotion stop. Because if you're really going to answer that question, it unravels a whole line of things in your life. And he just needs to get through his job at the checkout line, right? Like his job at the grocery store. And then when he goes home, he can either feel like he can approach that question or, drink a beer, smoke a bowl, watch TV and disassociate from it altogether because he knows he's got to do it again tomorrow because the bills have to fucking get paid. And I think I did that for the longest time, my whole life, is just the bills have to get paid. So it doesn't matter if I'm happy or not, right? Like, how are you doing? Fine. The paychecks are still coming in. And so when you're an entrepreneur and you're living in this creation space, things are a little different. Like, yes, capitalism still exists. Yes, I still have to pay my bills. But I'm also allowed the space where I can be honest now, because who's going to do anything to me? Who's going to take anything away from me? Right? My business is only as big or as little as I decide to make it. So there's a sense of freedom in that. As scary as it is, it's fucking scary to own your own business and be an entrepreneur. And like, sometimes there's too many clients. Other times there's not enough. Like I have to decide, do I like the freedom of that space that it gives me? And so that's kind of where I'm at now. You have to really be prepared to answer that question honestly.
Now, we've talked about times in your life where you weren't prepared to answer that question honestly. And then,
my whole life.
I know it doesn't always
now.
Yeah, I know it doesn't always work exactly like this, but then all of a sudden at some point you started to examine that question and you started to think about it. So what changed?
It was during COVID and we went on a vacation. We rented an RV. And I was like, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. Like, Chad, you living in a van and like doing what you do on the road. I want to do that. But I have 2 little kids. But that shifted all the energy for me because it was like, wow, people are doing this. Like, I can do this. I just have to decide this is what I want to do. And so that sort of shifted the energy for me of, do I want to come back from vacation? Do I want to be on vacation my whole life? Do I want to be traveling and working at the same time? And how do I make that happen? And so the only reason why we're landlocked right now is because my kids really want to stay in school, which is crazy. I'm like, don't you want to go travel on the road? And like, they're like, no, because you'll have to teach us and we don't want you doing that. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm terrible at it. Like, I'm a terrible teacher. So we figure, all right, let them stay for a little bit longer so they can read, write, and do all the math stuff. And then we're going to have an honest conversation because my husband and I really want to figure out, okay, how do we grow the brand and do it from the road? And he can still do construction. I can still do media stuff, but a lot of the focus will be turning the camera on ourselves and showing our day-to-day process, whether it's in vlogs, episodic format, whatever it is, flipping houses, buying land and starting a commune, which I keep hearing a lot of people want to do, like buy land and start a commune. Because where we are right now energetically as the human race tapping into our higher selves more and more, we realize we need each other. We really do need community. And I think I tapped into that a little bit where I was finally able to be vulnerable. And it was like, like the 9 to 5 life, 3 a.m. to 1 p.m. life of radio wasn't really what I wanted anymore. I wanted the freedom of my own time. And so being on vacation really and traveling in an RV with your whole family in one space, your whole heart right there. I was like, God, how do I make this happen? And so that sort of unraveled that for me. It was like, wow, maybe I don't want to do it this way. Maybe there is a different way of doing this and making money at it. So
it sounds like that was a feeling. Like you went on this RV trip and it seems like, I don't know, would you describe it that way? Like you felt something different and you liked that feeling and that opened you up to, can I bring that into my life more? Does that feel like it fits? And I think I'm just projecting because I had a very similar experience where during COVID, I had a full-time job and my wife and I had this inkling of like, I think we want to do some kind of van or travel or RV or whatever. We ended up going and spending like 3 months living up north in the Traverse City area during that time. And that gave me a feeling. It gave me a feeling of like, oh, life feels slower. I feel like I'm more in nature. This feels really good. Can I manufacture more of this in my life? And what decisions do I need to make to get there? So the nature of that question was completely projecting what happened to me. But do you feel like you went through a similar feeling? Was it a feeling that led you to want to decide to do something differently?
I think I got to a time in my life because it wasn't about, I had so much fun in radio and I had fun working in TV, all of those things. I just think I came to a point in my life where I was like, what truly brings me joy, right? I didn't come to this earth to wake up, go to work, come home exhausted, take a nap, hope I can get dinner on the table, go to sleep, kiss my kids goodnight, go to sleep and wake up and do it again. So having freedom in the day shifted my mindset to joy and appreciation and gratitude. And it's not that I wasn't appreciative to have all those jobs. They were incredible. But this mindset that I was in was, it is a paycheck. When I flip-flopped energetically to what brings me joy, that answer isn't necessarily a paycheck, right? Freedom to travel, to do what I want, and spend time with my family, and finding joy in every day. That was the feeling that I was after. Now, we live in a, society where I have to pay the bills, where I have to put food on the table, all those things. So then it was, okay, well, then how can I still get that freedom in my schedule and still pay the bills, right? And so, yes, the feeling of just true joy being in that RV and traveling for 2 weeks. We gave ourselves 2 weeks to do it. It was so much fun. And we visited family and we did all the things. And that's when I was like, wow, how can I do this on a daily basis? And getting outside and hiking and grounding and getting oxygen, right? Getting oxygen to your brain. When you're in like a TV studio, a radio studio, or a podcast studio, and you're in an editing studio, it's dark. There's no oxygen, right? There's no light. It's all manufactured light. So yeah, there was definitely a shift. And again, I am not ungrateful for any of the opportunities that I have had, and I may still go back to a corporate job. That may still be in my future. It's the one thing I do miss, if you ask me, is working with a team. Like, I love freelancers and I love my clients, but there's something very different about a team environment where everybody's sort of has the same goal and you're creating together. When you are the producer, the director, the writer, the everything, and you're bouncing stuff off with your clients who don't come from that background, it's a little different. It's definitely a little different. So,
and you get lonely.
It is lonely. It is lonely. I reached out to somebody the other day because I just need help with editors. It's like I have so much content that I know my own stuff. So I want to edit my own content, like the stuff that I'm using for my own brand, because I just know it. I know where I shot it. I know where it needs to go. I know the flow. I know the energy. But my client stuff, I can hand off to somebody. And that goes back to control. I have to give up some sort of control. And so I had worked with an editor. In my head, I'm like, I know she's going to fuck it up. She's not going to understand what I'm asking. And she didn't. But okay, so we do it again. So I give her notes. They can't learn. They can't read my mind. So I have to be okay with, okay, this is the new process of teaching people what my expectations are. because there's only 24 hours in a day and I can't shoot, plan, and edit everybody's stuff and also value my own. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now is, okay, can I still be a creator and give my clients the time that they need? I think yes, but there has to be some sort of outsourcing. And that's, again, being a part of a community and being okay to be vulnerable and say, I need help. I think so many of us are in a space where we are not saying that. And when you finally start, and I started this about in October, I had a mental breakthrough and not a mental breakdown, let's call it, where I realized I have to market myself, right? I was just word of mouth. I had a couple clients, but it wasn't enough money coming in to also like upgrade what I needed for my own stuff, right? Because most of the money I make, I put back into my brand so that I can then record my stuff and upgrade what my stuff looks like for myself. And so I had a breakthrough, screaming and crying in a parking lot. Oh, the amazing things happen after that scream and cry, man. And I screamed at the universe and I said, if I don't want to market, I don't want to buy ads, I don't want to be the person that sells herself. I shouldn't have to sell myself. I've always gone from job to job and people have always wanted to hire me. So I've always been word of mouth. I don't want to have to scale this by marketing myself and selling myself. You have to figure out a way. And so went to pick up my son who was at his friend's house. And his mom could see I was crying because I was like, swollen face, the whole thing. You couldn't cover it up. She was like, are you okay? And I was like, I could have said, yeah, everything's fine. And I didn't. I took a breath because I trusted her. And I said, no, I'm not okay. And she's like, well, do you want to talk about it? Let the boys play for a minute. I've got time. And I was like, I don't want to market myself. I have to grow this in some way so I can make money and pay the bills. But I don't want to market myself. I had a company that came to me and was like, pay us $12,000 a month and we can help you do, X, Y, Z. And I was like, but I don't want to scale that much either. Like, I don't want to scale. I don't want to become so busy that I don't have the freedom that I was so excited about having, right? Just years before traveling in an RV. Like, I don't want that either. More money, more problems. I just want to be able to make enough that I have enough time to create for myself and I have time to give to my clients the one-on-one attention they deserve. And she basically said, well, why are you not networking? Why are you not joining any moms groups that meet up and stuff? And I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, networking groups, stuff like that. And so she told me about this group called Social Oak. It's technically not a networking group. It's for women to get together once a month and just get to know each other. And through getting to know each other, you're automatically networking, right? And sharing. And I had been so isolated for so long. I think after I left radio, I sat in this room or my house for about 2.5, 3 years, not talking to other people, trying to do the work on myself that it never thought to me to reach out to other people to say, hey, I can do this. Do you need it? I can help you with this. Are you an entrepreneur that, needs help with this? Never thought to say, oh, I should reach out to other people. Just one-on-one, actually go and physically meet people. I don't have to buy thousands of dollars of ads on Meta. I can actually go talk to a human being and say, hey, this is what I do. This is how it can be of value to you. Are you interested? So I joined the group.
That's also, yeah, that's also more vulnerable, isn't it? It's
hard.
It's easier to wrap our heads around. At least it is for me. It's easier to wrap my head around. I can go post something online. I can kind of hide behind the screen. I don't see people's reactions live. I don't have to deal with the potential rejection live. All of those things. It feels safer to, well, let me just put some ads out and, let's just kind of see what happens and let's sit back and look at the numbers as opposed to going and meeting, talking with someone one-on-one, saying, this is what I do. Yes. Are you interested in that service? And they might say to your face, no. And can you process and accept that answer? And how do you interpret that? And for a while, for me, that was, well, if they say no, that is a personal attack on me and I am not good enough.
Correct. And so I try to not be in that space. I like the social groups because they're fun. You're doing a thing, like whether it's candle making or making salad or yoga or something, your mind is doing something or your body's doing something. So your mind doesn't have to sell. You're just there to connect. And I may not even talk about, I don't even think I talked about, well, the very first one I did, I was actually videotaping for the client because as soon as I reached out to her, the woman who started Social, Rhonda, Dr. Rhonda, she's a chiropractor. She's incredible. She's also a life coach. But I reached out to her and I said, hey, I know that this event is filled. It's sold out. I just want to come do this for free for you. I just want to show you what I can do. Not that you have to hire me, none of that. I just want to do it to challenge myself. And that's what I started doing, was just doing stuff for people to challenge myself. And she was like, yeah, sure, fine, come, do your thing. And so I did it. I went, I got to meet people just by being there. They could see physically what I do because I had a camera in their face and I had a microphone and doing the whole thing. And that made me feel more comfortable because I had the camera between me and another human being. Right? Does that make sense? So I was like, okay, I'm in my happy zone because I'm doing the thing I do and I don't have to be vulnerable fully and just be a human and connect. So that sort of helped me with that first moment where it's like, okay, I have the camera in between us. They can see what I do. I don't have to sell it. And from literally that moment on, I've not had to sell anything. I've just connected with people, word of mouth. Dr. Rhonda has hired me. She's sent me to other people, or they'll see her content and say, who's shooting your stuff? Oh my God, it looks amazing. And so she'll send them my information. And then that's happened with everybody. It's like a domino effect. Once I was kind of just like, I just want to do this to challenge myself and give you value for nothing. Like, let me just show you what I can do. That sort of shifted that energy of having to market and sell. So the next event that I'm going to, I'll bring the camera anyway, because I can't not. I love recording. I do record everything I do. So even if it's just a vlog for myself, if she doesn't want it, that's fine. But I don't use it as a barrier anymore. Does that make sense? I bring people into what I'm doing now, where it's like, I'll turn the camera on them and myself instead of just flipping it just to them. I'm learning to keep myself in that vulnerable space and just asking questions, just like you're doing. Like, you don't have to prep a lot of stuff. When you're energetically sharing that space with each other and you're holding space for somebody, the magic is what flows out of it. And so when I'm doing the daily stuff or the daily vlog stuff, I just sort of go with it. I don't plot out what I'm doing. And so the magic is in the edits. We all know that, but there's also magic in the rawness. So a lot of the stuff that I've been showing are the fuck ups, are to show my clients like, yeah, I had to do this one line 10 times. Me, who's been in this business for so long, who should like be able to just do like one and done. No, I had to do it 10 times because it didn't look right or it didn't sound right or I stuttered or I said a word wrong. And that's okay. It's okay to do it over and over again until we feel comfortable. There's also a point in time where I had to learn there's no perfect, right? There's no such thing as perfect.
Yep.
Right? Like, how many times are you going to edit this episode? Right? Like, you have to give it up at some point in time. It makes me think of like directors with movies, right? Like, at a certain point in time, the final cut has to happen. And whether you're okay with it or not, sometimes doesn't matter. You have to press publish. You have to press play. You have to just put it out there, right? And so I'm sure there's directors that would love to go back and recut stuff from major movies. But at a certain point in time, if energetically you're like, you know what, I did the best that I could do today, or I did the best that I could do in this film, or I did the best that I can do in this podcast or this meeting or whatever it is, that's okay. Sometimes that's enough.
That's beautiful. I completely agree. Creating for yourself. I have a difficult relationship with sort of justifying the investment of my time and energy into my own endeavors. I have had different mentors in my life, and I've had, a lot of messages around revenue producing activities, and we've got to, identify the things that move the needle the most, and those are the things that we need to invest into. And yet you and I are having this conversation. I invest probably 10-ish hours a week to this podcast. It produces $0. In fact, I lose money on it, and yet I do it anyway. And I guess I'm just curious about, what is your relationship to prioritizing creating for yourself? And do you struggle with it?
It really depends on what you want your return on investment to be, right? Why are you doing the podcast? What was the reason that you even decided to do it in the first place? You have to remind yourself of the why, because it is a slow burn. Like we tell our clients all the time, it is a slow burn. You have to stay consistent and remind yourself every time you look in the mirror in the morning, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And if it's just simply because I need to create, like an artist with a painting or a musician, I just have to get it out. It's in here and I have to get it out. Whether it's an art form or a podcast, anything, we're all creators, right? There's sometimes you're just like, I don't know why. I just have to do it. And my return on investment, I may not even realize until years down the road. And that's okay. I gave myself the time and I showed up for myself. And that has to be enough sometimes. It just has to be okay. And so as you keep doing it, Chad, and as you keep growing and as you keep giving yourself that time, it may devolve or evolve. It may change. But be proud that you showed up for yourself and you did the thing. You weren't just thinking about it over and over again. Because when you're on that merry-go-round and it's the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again, it's horrifying. What you do, it's an art form, right? What we do is an art form. And sometimes you just have to get it out. Like, I just have to get it out. And it may mean $0, 0 subscribers, 0 likes, but that's okay too, because I did the thing. I showed up for myself and I created. And that has to just be enough. My return on investment was giving myself the time to be in that space of creating.
That's been an important process for me. I've spent many years of my life not ever taking the time to define my why in the first place. And so then I'm chasing numbers, I'm chasing statistics, I'm chasing metrics that I can't control. And that's been, I'd say, in the last year, probably a big thing for me of like, hold on, time out. Just like we've talked about in this conversation, really be honest with yourself. Why do you want to do this thing? And are you okay with what answers come up? And as I've continued to ask that question and get a lot more clear on what's my intention and what is my ROI going to be? And just like you've talked about, I always thought it was money or I thought it was metrics, and I've just realized it's really not any of those things. That's not my intention and my motivation behind the things that I want to create and put into the world. And finally, I had to just, I guess, accept that was okay.
Well, ask any rich person, does money make you happy? They'll tell you no. It's more money, more problems. So I had to really decide, okay, do I want to be rich? Why do I want to be rich? Oh, because I want freedom. Freedom to do what? Freedom to do whatever I want in the day. Okay, well, how can I have freedom in my day without the money, right? Like without having to be rich. And I also had to redefine what success was, right? I think my version of success was what other people perceived as success or perceived me as being successful, right? When I started to realize, wow, success for me was I got up, I showered, my depression and ADHD didn't take over today, right? Like I'm going to be able to get a meal on the table tonight for my kids and probably get some editing time in there. That's success. You know what I mean? It's just, I had to change the why. I didn't want to be rich for the money. I wanted money because I thought money equated freedom, and it doesn't. It just doesn't. And I had to change what success was to me. If I'm perceived as unsuccessful because I'm not a billionaire, right? And I wasn't able to create Meta, you know what I mean? I didn't invent the Tesla. Okay, that's your perception of what success is. I don't fucking care anymore about how I'm perceived. I just don't. What I care about is how do I feel at the end of the day? When I'm going to bed, am I happy with what I did that day? Yes, perfect. Then I was successful. Money brings nothing but more problems. And it's like, if you can have that freedom in your mind every day, and that's ultimately the goal, then great. The bills are paid. There's food on the table. Cool. We're good.
It's a beautiful message for us to end on. I don't even have anything else to add because that was that was awesome. Thank you for investing time with me. You know, as we talk about all of this, this is really my why behind it. Is that I end an hour, whatever minute conversation, and I feel like I've invested into something meaningful. You know, I've connected with another human. I don't feel as alone. I feel energized. I feel like, so I find myself whenever I just end these recordings, and at this point in time, no one has heard our conversation, but I feel like I got to connect with someone who I didn't know before. We got to have a meaningful conversation. And anyway, I appreciate you meeting me here and showing up and be willing to have a conversation like this as well. And I feel like we've already won.
You've created space. You created space where I wasn't on my phone, right? Like I wasn't worried about what's to come. I wasn't thinking about the past a little bit. I wasn't thinking about the future. You create a space with this podcast where I have to focus on you for an hour and a half. And that's it. And that there's something magical when you can create space for somebody, whether you're a massage therapist, right? Or anybody in a service industry where the person has to put their phone away and focus directly on what we are doing. When you can create space for someone, it's such an amazing thing. And that's what you're doing. You're creating space and giving people a chance to breathe and just be in this moment. And we don't do that enough in our daily lives. And that's when the universe will tap you on the shoulder. And that's when you get sick or something happens, because they're going to say, you know what? You need time. You need time. Just do nothing. Just be. And that's what you're giving people the opportunity to do. And I'm so very grateful for you to doing it. Today was just the perfect day. I know we're recording this, but it's 12:21, 1221. Did you notice that? Like, It's beautiful. It's just a beautiful thing. It's just, there's balance to it. And what you're doing is bigger than anything that you can imagine right now. And that's okay.
Thank you for saying that. And thank you for that reminder. It's meaningful to me. So thank you. If people want to find you, if they want to find out about the work that you're doing, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
My Instagram is at producer Rachel Giordano right now. I don't know. I keep changing it. You can also go to sngmedia.com, I think is my website. I don't even know. We'll tag it. Do you tag stuff in your stuff? I'll send it to you. But yeah, at producer Rachel Giordano, Giordano, on Instagram is an easy way to find me. And you'll see all my little vlogs and you'll get to know how crazy I really am.
Awesome. Well, Rachel, thank you again for being a part of this, and thanks for investing your time with me today. It was really meaningful.
Thank you for doing this. I'm so glad. I'm hoping you're happy.
I am. I'm thrilled. I'm through the moon. So, I trust and rest in that. So thank you. Hey folks, as always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for tuning into the podcast, and thank you for your support. It really means a lot to me, and I appreciate it. If you enjoyed this conversation, or if you enjoyed other episodes of the podcast, could you take a second to leave a 5-star review? That would mean the world to me. Thank you in advance for doing so. Lastly, you can find links to connect with Rachel down in the show notes, and you can also find links to support the show financially. So if you'd like to do so, take a second to head down there. And aside from that, I'll see you next week.